Morning all. Hopefully the video is coming through nice and clear this morning. We've got a very horrible misty morning in Brisbane this morning. I'm not sure how it is in wherever your local area might be, but we got a big session we're going to talk about today. So the focus of today's session, or this morning's session, is overcoming the frequent objections you guys face, particularly when it comes to listing properties at vendor meetings, at listing presentations and the like. So to those that have sent through some objections already in the last couple of days, thank you for doing that. We're going to go through and cover off on those. If you haven't done that, that's okay. You haven't missed your chance yet. If there's anything that is sitting there that we don't cover that you'd like us to, or anything that you hear a lot in your local area when you go down with vendors and start to talk about auction, now a bit All right, just some feedback coming through there, but we're all good to go. So we actually did a training session yesterday, which was a half-day training session for a company down on the Gold Coast, and we spoke about the implications of when a seller is entering the market overpriced. So in the research that we've had so far in 2018 in our local area, which is predominantly southeast Queensland, what we've got at the moment is a situation where vendors are actually starting the campaigns 11% above where they're selling their property. So when a seller sits from day one of when we sit down and talk to them and say, look, what would you love to achieve for your property? They're actually sitting 11% above where the market is eventually going to transact the property at, which hits us with a real problem right from day one, which is how do we actually list the property, or how do we handle those overpriced expectations while still giving them hope? Because if we don't give them hope, they'll go and list with someone who does believe in their property and gives them hope and promises the world. And then we're going to leave a situation where we're potentially going to be chewing up listings. We always say there's only three ways you can ever answer any question. You can either say yes, you can say no, or you can say maybe. And each of these have, I guess, some problems that go with it. The first one is you say yes, is that you overpromise and then you're going to deliver them an atlas even after you promise them the world, because you're going to get to a situation at the end where they're going to say, well, you said to me I can achieve X my property, so why now are you telling me to accept Y? So we actually just end up pushing the problem further down the line. By saying no, like we mentioned, we open the door for someone else to come in who tells them yes, who believes in their property to list it with. And by saying maybe, which is anything along the lines of, look, if it's out there, I'm the agent to get it for you, or it's not for me to decide, it's up for the market to decide, et cetera, et cetera. We look like A, we don't know, or B, we're hedging our bets, which is not a position of strength that we're going to come from when it comes time to hopefully for them to choose us to list the property. So we're talking about how we actually hit this solution and what the best possible answer is. And I actually think the best answer that we can give is actually a combination of all three. So it's a hybrid answer between the yes, the no, and also the maybe as well. So what we're coaching, or what we're saying at the moment to a lot of the agents, is it actually isn't the worst strategy in the world to allow the sellers to enter the market at the figure they want to enter it at. Because what you're saying by doing that is you're actually saying to them, look, it's not for me to decide what your property is worth, or it's not for you to decide either. It's actually up for the market to decide. So I'll tell you what we can do. Why don't we enter the market at the figure that you want to enter it at, but set some clear parameters around it that if we don't get requisite inspections or requisite interest inside of the first few days, then we come back and we sit down and we re-strategize. And I'll explain the kind of the implications and why I actually like this approach at the moment from a situation where sellers are still sitting above the market, even though our market conditions, particularly in our local area here, are not that favorable. So I think what you want to say to the seller is to say, look, Mr. Seller, if let's say, argument's sake, we think the property sits somewhere in the early 700s and they say we want 800 plus, to say, look, what price in a perfect world, if you had the choice over your strategy, where would you like to list this property for sale at? And I'll say, okay, well, if we want to achieve 800, we obviously need to start a little bit higher, work our way backwards. We want to list the property at let's say, 829. Okay. Look, it's not for me to decide at 829. Based upon the recent sales, I think that figure might be on the high side of where we might be looking to achieve, but I'm not here to tell you that we can't get it, because I'd like to try and get you the best possible price that exists out there in the marketplace. So I'll tell you what we do. Let's list your property at 829. Let's put it on the market, but let's set some clear parameters right now, because our first 2 weeks is going to be the best time for inquiry on this property. That inside the first week, if we haven't received more than 6 inspections and more than 6 inquiries, we sit back down this time again next week and we review our strategy 1 week after the property goes live. Are you comfortable with that? What that actually does, and I know there's going to be some pushback on this, that people will say, well, you're going to ruin the listing and things like that. But what you actually do is you actually put it out there to the seller to say, hey, look, I'm here to support you and run with what you want. And you actually allow them to get it out of their system. So they've actually gone to the market at 829. If it's in the low sevens, then the market's not going to respond to it. So you're not going to get any inquiry probably at all, maybe a couple of curious onlookers, but you're going to struggle to get the requisite number of inspections you're going to need to hit that half a dozen number. But you've actually allowed the seller to blow off their steam at the figure that they like. Then we can sit back down with them. We can say, okay, look, we've given it a try this way. Now I think our best opportunity to get the best possible price is going to be, let's strip the price off it. Let's take a no price marketing campaign and let's go with that. And what that actually does is twofold. Number one, as we mentioned, we allow the seller to blow off the steam around the listing, which is a good thing, because we've actually demonstrated, not through us telling them, but through the market telling them, that their figure probably doesn't exist at that present point in time. But the second thing that it allows us to do, it actually sets up a lot of our dialogue, particularly in an auction scenario, that we can use that actually help us with our buyers. And we were talking about this yesterday, and we were discussing about how the retail chains do this to us all the time. You know, the David Jones of the world and the Myers of the world, they put a price on an item, they cross out that price, and then they put another price that is lower, and we go and buy that item, and we think we saved X amount of dollars. It's actually quite similar to what we can do now. So what we can actually say to buyers when they ring up and they say, yeah, look, I saw that property was on the market at a price. You can say, yeah, absolutely. Look, it was listed at 829. The property didn't sell at that figure. My sellers are now recognised that the motivation is particularly strong. They need a cash contract on this home within 3 weeks. That's why they're going through to auction now. So you actually then have set it up to say, look, here's your high price that David Jones used. What's the low price that you can get it for, and then what's the value in between? Because if that buyer eventually transacts on that property at $730,000, which is probably where we thought it sat all the way along, I guarantee that the conversation they're going to have at the housewarming barbecue is going to be, how good are we? This property was on the market at $820 and we managed to pick it up for $730. And they've created $90,000 of value or inflated value in their own mind, which is exactly what the retail chains do to us, on Boxing Day and all the other sales that they have. So the message behind all this is don't be afraid to actually list it at the overpriced figure. Give it a week to blow the cobwebs out from the listing, from the seller, from their expectations. But make sure when you do that you set the parameters clearly at the start to say, we need to get this marker and this marker. If we don't, then we come back and we review. Because if you let it sit for a couple of weeks, you say, oh, we'll see how it goes and then we'll review it, you'll end up being 2 or 3 weeks down the path, and then you would have done damage to the listing. So our number one charter is to make sure that we say it's got to be 6 inspections or whatever the number is in your local area, 6 inspections and 6 inquiries. And if we don't get that, we're sitting back down to review our marketing and make a change, because we don't want to waste away our best time for inquiry, because as we know, the best buyers are usually floating around at the start because they've missed out on other properties and they're further down the buying timeline. So just something that might help us there, a little bit of dialogue that might help you if you do have a lot of sellers that are overpriced, which is, let's face it, pretty much everyone at the moment. But we're going to go through now these frequent objections that we got sent through. Again, you're welcome at any stage. Just jump on the chat, put a frequent objection up there. We're happy to answer it for you live here. I'm going to use Pat Ivy, one of our team. He's logged in, and that was his microphone that was causing all the damage before. But hopefully Pat now is quiet in the background noise. And we're going to use Pat.
I'm so sorry. It's hard to find a quiet space around here, Justin.
It is, Pat. It is indeed. But it's good to have you.
I've got you now.
You are live. You are. Everyone is listening. So we're going to role play a couple of these frequent objections. So the first one that we got. And thanks to the guys again that sent these through, I really appreciate it. This one was sent through actually by quite a few of the people that responded, which says, and Pat, I'll let you take it away, but it says, I don't look at auction properties if I see them online. So Pat, you're going to play the role of the vendor. I'm going to play the role of the agent, and let's see if we can try and skip past these frequent objections.
Okay, cool. So just clearing it up, in presentation, where you're trying to sign me up, or am I already a couple of weeks into the campaign and you're my agent?
We're a listing presentation, so I'm battling it out with all my local competitors in the area, and
perfect.
Battle for the listing.
So Justin, I respect that you're pitching auction. Obviously, the majority of agents in this area actually have an auction. Personally, if I'm looking online on realestate.com or Domain, I actually see an auction and I don't click into it myself if I'm looking to buy it. So yeah, I'm not really that eager to go down the auction path, considering I know that some of my friends and family are very similar. They don't click into auction properties.
Sure. Do you mind if I ask, Pat, is that when you look at properties as a buyer or when you're looking to research the market?
As a purchaser, yes.
Yeah. So if you see an auction property, you'll just skip straight past it.
Yeah, I won't even click in because I think, much here, or I can't bid at auction.
Yeah, sure. Look, that makes a lot of sense, Pat. And I guess, and I'm going to answer this as if you were a seller rather than as if we were doing training around it. Pat, do you mind if I ask you, the last time that you were searching for a property, what was your criteria? So what suburb were you looking into?
Coorparoo, Camp Hill, yeah, mainly those two suburbs.
Okay, so Coorparoo and Camp Hill. What was the size of the block that you wanted?
6 square meters. I didn't want any smaller than that.
Okay, how many bedrooms did you require?
3 or 4 bedroom ideally, but can definitely work with 3.
How many bathrooms?
Look, I'd love an ensuite, but in a lot of those post-war homes, obviously they've just got the 1 bathroom. Second bathroom's, a huge advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else that you wanted, Pat? Did you want a deck? Did you want a pool? Did you need to be close to anything in particular?
Outdoor living's really important to me, and a garage, but again, I've just got to understand that sometimes they don't have the internal car garage. It's generally in a carport or something like that, which is certainly user-friendly.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. So, Pat, you actually sell in these suburbs, coincidentally enough, which I'm sure you picked because you had some uber local knowledge on it. Pat, how many properties would be on the market right now in Coorparoo and Camp Hill that would fit the exact criteria that you asked for, including all of your wish list?
Between, I would have thought, 15 and 20.
So there's a reasonable choice, but not huge amounts. Now, if they're on the market and they've been on the market for a while, there's going to be a degree of overpriced ones there, which is probably going to be about half. So you're probably going to be left with probably between 7 and 10 live listings that are attractive to the market. There might be no price or maybe with a price that's attractive there. So you don't have a huge amount of choice. There's a bit of choice there, but there's not a huge amount that you've got in front of you. So I guess, Pat, I'll ask you this question. So you've narrowed it down to you've only got about 7 options that are in the market at the moment, and a new listing pops up and it satisfies every single one of your criteria. Tick, 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 all the way down the page. The only thing that doesn't satisfy your criteria is it is listed as an auction. Do you still do nothing?
Well, if they've only got option or a couple of options, well, therefore I will have to click into the auction. But as I said to you, it's just not my preference, Justin.
Yeah, sure. And this is the question I think you need to ask the people when they say this, is to say, look, if you're in that situation and think like a buyer, don't think like a seller, put yourself in that situation, what would you do? And there's 2 answers they're going to say. They're going to say, well, yes, we would send an inquiry and try and find out the price. Well, if that's the answer, we say, well, Mr. Seller, one of the reasons you employ me is my skill set is transforming people who don't really want to inquire in a property but do it out of reluctance or wanting to keep it to translate you across to an inspection. So that's on me. That's my skill set of having the dialogue either on the phone or via email to be able to translate those 2 things. If Pat is still adamant and Pat is saying, no, you know what, we wouldn't even look at it. We just tell you what, nah, if it's an auction, they can go and jump. We're gonna hold off. We're gonna go look at properties with a price because that's gonna make us easier for you. I think the first thing we need to acknowledge here is there's 2 things. Number one, if buyers give a choice, they will prefer to buy not at auction because the terms favour them not at auction, and at auction they favour the seller. So of course they're going to naturally gravitate away from auction. The second thing is, and we spoke about this about handling price inquiry, is that buyers get frustrated when there's no price because as consumers we get trained to buy things with a price. So we want to buy things with a price because that's how we buy everything. Jesse and I bought a coffee on the way in this morning. And we spoke about last time with Nicole eating at McDonald's, is that we like knowing prices on things because it gives us certainty. When that gets stripped away, of course, it's going to be an uncomfortable situation. So let's not kid ourselves. Buyers would prefer there to be a price on there. But we work for the seller and we know our key ingredients to get the best possible price is emotion before logic. So people seldom buy real estate with logic. What they do is they buy with emotion and they justify with logic later. So our job is to get you emotionally hooked first and then let price get in. So coming back to what Pat said, which Pat says, you know what, I wouldn't even look at it. Let's go to auction. They can bugger off. Okay, Pat. Well, that's quite okay because as you probably understand, auction is about 3 stages. And this is old and classic auction training, this one. Our first stage here is pre-auction. So the people that we try and sell the property to pre-auction are the people that really don't want to compete, but they end up competing by not competing. So it's a competitive environment that isn't actually face-to-face competition, but it's perceived competition. This middle section here is our traditional auction sale environment. That's where we get cash unconditional contracts, and then we can sell the property there to someone who is competing because that's the most transparent environment. What we actually have over here, Pat, is this third stage of auction. And people don't really talk about the third stage of auction much. Just going to turn the volume up a little bit there, guys. We don't really talk about the third stage of auction much because it's kind of the afterthought. People just sort of go, well, it's all about this middle section here. Well, the reality is with auctions here in the southeast corner, is the third stage is actually really valuable because what we tend to find is actually a new group of buyers enters the listing at that point if we haven't sold it to a cash unconditional buyer prior to that position. So people like the need terms and conditions, they'll enter the market at that time. People like you who don't like auctions and are waiting for the certainty of a price will enter the market at that time. People that may have seen the property late in the campaign that couldn't get all their ducks in a row, they will enter the market at that present point in time as well. So this is actually really valuable, Pat, because the important thing to note here is we're going to put a price on the property in this third stage. But the price there we're going to set is going to be set with knowledge of the market, which we don't have at this point in time. So the reason why I don't think we don't put a price on it right now is because we're going to be guessing. And there's 2 mistakes we can make. We can go too high, we can scare people away. Or the worst mistake we can make is actually go too low and we undersell your property. And I'm sure you don't want that to happen, do you, Pat?
Nope, not at all.
Not at all.
I want top dollar.
Of course you do, Pat. You're a seller. That's one of the 2 fundamental rules. So what actually is the situation, Pat, is we will find you as a buyer in this third stage here if we need you at that point in time. But we may sell it to a cash unconditional buyer prior to that point with terms that actually benefit you as the seller. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And terms are pretty important to me because I don't want any renegotiations on building and pests taking place.
No, well, the unfortunate thing here in Queensland is that all of the conditions around a contract are all in the favour of the buyer rather than in favour of the seller. The building and pest one is definitely in the favour of the buyer. It's a glorified cooling off period. The cooling off section is in the favour of the buyer as well, and the finance clause is also in the favour of the buyer. So any terms and conditions that enter our contract are there for the benefit of the buyer, not for the benefit of you. So let's work on plan A, which is actually not having those terms and conditions attached to the contract at all. Yep. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. The next one we've got, Pat, you've got your list there. This one's from Barry Chick up there on the Tamarine Mountain. I can only imagine, mate, it's going to be nice and misty and cold up on the mountain this morning. Hopefully you got the wood going there and keeping the tootsies warm, so to speak. Pat, take it away.
So auctions cost a lot, I hear, Justin. You know, I've already got a $3,500 marketing campaign that you want me to cough up. It just makes no sense that you want me to spend another $170 on an engineer that's going to be here for 20 minutes. I don't really want to have to pay for that.
No, look, I can understand that. We obviously want to try and keep the costs down as much as we can. The first thing I'll say is that your auction campaign and your private treaty campaigns should cost the exact same amount of money. There's no reason why an auction campaign should be $5,000 and a private treaty campaign should be $1,500. They should cost exactly the same amount, apart from what Pat mentioned, which is the auctioneer's fee. Now, what do you receive when you invest in an auctioneer? Other than a charming, good-looking professional at the top end of their game. I saw Mark McGoldrick's online from Christchurch. G'day, Mark. You are who I think of when I say a charming, good-looking auctioneer made at the top of their game. But what you're actually receiving, Mr. Seller, is you're receiving a third-party negotiator. So you're receiving someone who actually is unemotionally tied to the outcome of the sale. Because I'm the agent, and you know that you're paying me as someone who's going to benefit from selling the property. You know that the business owner, if they're helping us negotiate, they're getting paid by proxy of their agent split. the seller is going to benefit by the sale of the property, and the buyer is going to benefit by buying the property. So all four of those people all have skin in the game, which means they're emotionally tied to the outcome. Being that auctioneers are paid as a service fee, not a result-based fee, what that actually allows you to be is a more unemotional and stable presence in the negotiation. Because you don't have the same fear of it not actually proceeding. So what they can actually generate for you is they can generate an unemotional negotiation, which is so important. Because the reason why private sales don't work is because you get the buyer and the seller banging heads. So the auction of the day is actually the third party who's the level-headed one, because they actually don't worry about their income being tied to the outcome. That makes sense. Secondly to that as well is the average closing bid at an auction through the research that we've generated is $2,500. That's the average closing bid at an auction. So if by the skill of your auctioneer, they can generate one more bid at the auction. So if they're skillful enough through all the training and effort and development that they do to generate you one more bid at the auction. And I would say that hopefully most of us work with auctioneers that have the skill to be able to do that. You've just paid for your investment 3 or 4 times over from one more bid. And that's why you pay the amount that you do, because you pay for the auctioneer to do all the training and do all the development and do everything to allow them to be in a situation where they can actually generate that one more bid. And that's actually why you employ them. And that's the difference between going with an auctioneer who's good at their craft and treats it like a full-time occupation to someone who might just do it. Because the discrepancy between fees between hobby auctioneers and career auctioneers is actually not that great. When you consider the benefit that a career auctioneer can bring, it's certainly going to pay for itself. Pat, does that help?
Yeah, absolutely.
Barry had another one, Pat. We'll hear this one from you.
Yep. Look, I'm really concerned come auction day. What if we actually don't sell it under the hammer? What if there is no result at auction? Is this all a waste of time? Am I never even going to sell? Or what's the situation, Justin? I'm really scared.
Yeah, sure. Well, look, here in Southeast Queensland, you're probably aware that the clearance rate, which we're going to cover off on a little bit later on as well, but the clearance rates generally hover anything from the low 40% to the low 50%, depending on volume, time of the year, how the market's sort of rolling along. So there's clearly a large degree of properties that don't sell and that go past in. But as we mentioned here about this third stage, it's certainly not for waste, because what actually we have is, while the auction campaign is running, we're effectively running a market survey, so we can actually find the right price to go to the market at if we don't sell it on the day. So every single inspection that we get, and we've done a lot of training around this, and our next session is going to really focus on generating offers prior to auction. But our campaign is run as an information gathering exercise to do one of two things: A, either sell the property on the day, or B, if that doesn't happen, to make sure that our list price here is as attractive as possible to the market while still doing the best thing by the seller. So to answer your question, Pat, absolutely it's not a waste. Our plan A is to sell the property under the hammer or before, absolutely. But if that doesn't happen, like I said, we're going to have this next group of this next influx of buyers who then are going to be dictated to by the price that we put out there. So at the very least, what we managed to do is we managed to research the market, have more knowledge than we had 30 days ago, which is going to avoid us making a pricing mistake.
Yeah, okay.
Adam Wishart.
Very good. Thanks for answering that.
No worries. Adam Wishart sent in.
Adam Wishart, auctions don't work in Queensland. Oh, that's a big call, isn't it? Sorry, no, I forgot I'm a vendor. Yeah, look, having a chat with my family members last night about this, they've reassured me that they click on the realestate.com email every Saturday night saying clearance is at 35 to 40%. Look, that's not good. That's dismal. Auctions don't work up here, do they, Justin?
Yeah, well, look, it's funny. We hear a lot, and we're very fortunate to go around and do a lot of training and a lot of auctions around everywhere. We have what we call the One Town South theory. So the One Town South theory goes a little bit like this. So we start up the top of Queensland in Cairns, and we go to do training in Cairns, and they say to us, look, auctions don't work here. Auctions work down in Townsville. We go to Townsville, and Townsville says, look, mate, it's not us. If you want to do auctions and then for work, you need to go down to Mackay. Mackay says, no, not us. You need to go down to Rockhampton. That's where the auctions tend to succeed. You go to Rockhampton, and they say, look, you need to go down to the Big Smoke of the Sunshine Coast. That is the place where the auctions happen. You go to the Sunshine Coast, and they say, look, no. This is a pretty sleepy country town, really. Brisbane, that's the centre of, that's where it happens. We go to Brisbane. Brisbane say, look, it's not us, it's Sydney. Sydney's the auction place. You know, it's just not us. It's Sydney's a better auction market. Sydney goes, well, we're not the auction capital. That's Melbourne. Melbourne says, look, auctions are okay here, but they're probably better down in Hobart. And then Hobart's stuffed because they've got no one to push it onto any further south. But everyone thinks that auctions work one town south of actually where they are. The reality is this, and let's talk about clearance rates here for a second about things working and not working. So even if the clearance rate, and I saw last week, the clearance rate was 34%. 34%. What that actually translates to is this, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. 34%, over 1 in 3 of sellers last week dictated to the market, this is the day we're going to sell our property. We need a cash unconditional contract on this day with no terms attached to it whatsoever. And it has to be at a figure that we're happy with. And 1 in 3 sellers got that. That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Now, we would love the clearance rate to be 60%, but the reality is we're just not in that sort of marketplace. So for comparison's sake, the private treaty clearance rate on any given weekend in Southeast Queensland was between 2.5 and 3.5%. So 2.5 to 3.5% is the comparison clearance rate of private treaty in Southeast Queensland. So across a 4-week auction campaign, so we'll do it by 4 to give you equity, what that translates is to 10 to 14%. 10 to 14% of sellers on private treaty managed to get a contract on a day they didn't stipulate last week, with terms and conditions attached to it that may or may not go through at a price they were comfortable with. So I would think that is a superior outcome to the alternative. And the interesting thing about this is this. So Sydney has a better auction clearance rate than Brisbane. There's no hiding behind that. Sydney generally sits somewhere around 60-ish%. But Sydney also has a superior private treaty rate. So Sydney's private treaty rate hovers between 7 and 9% on any given weekend. So Sydney's not a better auction market than Brisbane. Sydney's just a better market than Brisbane. And the oldest rule in markets is supply and demand. There just happens to be more demand for property down in Sydney. So that's just the way that shakes out. So I can understand that you say that auctions don't work here, but I would actually argue by the statistics that auctions actually work a lot better than the alternative. And our job is to give you the best possible alternative and the pathway to sell your property. Does that help, Pat?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. This is also, I think this ties into the one that we had next, which was Stephen Brown, which said auctions don't work in my area. Thanks for dropping that in, Stephen. Good to have you there. Auctions don't work in my area. Similar sort of theory. So if you don't have a lot of auctions that happen in your area, it's usually a byproduct of whoever the leading agent is in an area. So the attitude that a community or an area has towards auctions and towards vendor-paid marketing is usually shaped by the agent or the agency that does the most transactions in that area. So if you're a really strong auction agent and you're the leading agent in your area, well then you're going to be pro-auction, which means your buyers that you deal with and your vendors are going to become more pro-auction and you're going to see more auctions and spinning. If you're the leading agent in the area and you say, no, you should never pay for marketing, well then the vendors are going to get used to not paying for marketing, which means that's going to filter on through that area. So the good news for you is twofold. Number one, if you're the leading agent in the area, congratulations. You've got a lot of scope there to influence the marketplace. Number two, if you're not the leading agent in the area, you've got a great spot to be proving a point of difference. So that you can look at that. Next one is again from, this one was actually sent in by Barry Chick, but this was from everyone. Ross Bischoff, the RBT team. I see Emma's online. G'day, Emma.
We love the RBT team.
Sure, we sure do. I think Barry might have mentioned this as well. So, Pat, take it away.
I've had a really, really negative experience with auction in the past. I had this agent, and I remember it like it was yesterday. He had no idea what he was doing. I didn't get any feedback. Come auction day, we didn't have any bidders. Oh, I just don't want to go through this again. I hate auction. I don't want to go list with you with auction.
Yeah, I can understand. Do you want to ask, Pat, have you ever gone to a private treaty open home and the property hasn't sold then and there?
Oh, yeah, well, a lot of the time.
Did you ever walk away from that open home going, I'm never going to do a private treaty because that didn't sell?
No, I didn't actually.
Interesting. Well, funny how we tie the result to one process, but we don't tie the result to another process the same way.
Yeah, you're right.
Do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions, Thomas? And again, guys, if there's any other objections you want answered, please feel free to type one into the chat box. I've got a question for you here, Pat. What's go on if I get some background information on your campaign. How many inspections did the listing generate?
Oh, I think he had 3 or 4. It was, as I said, it was fairly dismal.
Okay, so only 3 or 4 inspections through the whole campaign.
Sure. Yep.
Okay. Well, I think we can isolate the problem already. The problem is obviously the marketing didn't quite hit the market, and probably there wasn't enough strong enough dialogue to encourage enough inspections, because 3 or 4 inspections is generally not a requisite number enough to sell the home. So I think our focus would be making sure, and forget about the method of sale, the focus is actually making sure that the marketing is good enough to attract more inspections. The average number of inspections that we get on a property or on a campaign is 21. The average number of inspections we get on an auction campaign is 25. So as you can see, with 3 or 4 inspections, it's going to be quite difficult to actually make that happen. So we're going to really focus on that and work on that primary point to try and get.
Well, I didn't want to pay for print marketing, and I remember he tried to make me pay to go on Domain, and I said Domain doesn't work. So yeah, I ended up just giving him a small little highlight on realestate.com. So yeah, that might make sense.
Yeah, so there's a few things that we can do that. I guess the question that I put to you, Pat, is this too. So if I was standing in front of an easel, so I've got an easel like this and a blank sheet of paper, and I had a paintbrush and I had a thing of paint, and Picasso was standing next to me in front of the same easel with the same paintbrush and the same bit of paint, do you reckon we produce the same picture?
No.
Same with auction. Agents run auctions differently. Auction's just the method or the process. The application is actually, and the execution is on the agent.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I've got to say, it was a pretty dud agent, Nico. I don't think he's still a real estate agent. Yeah. So, yeah, I've had a negative experience there, but I can tell you, you've cleared it up.
I'm not here to comment on what the agent did do or didn't do, or what their skill set was. I can only demonstrate what I do. And our auction percentage so far in this year, our opportunity to sell percentage. So this is just something, just to step out of this role play for a second. I really believe that if you want to start talking things that are relevant to the seller, forget about talking about clearance rates. Talk about what your percentage is of opportunity to sell percentage. So out of the auctions we've had this year, Mr. Mrs. Seller, 96% of our sellers had an opportunity to sell their property within 3 weeks, because that's what we can control. Clearance rates we can't control because it's ultimately resting on the seller's decision. And this is one of my frustrations with clearance rates, is general being, reported out to the marketplace, is clearance rates only reflect the percentage of sellers who are willing to accept the market on a given weekend. It doesn't reflect market strength. Opportunity to sell percentage reflects market strength that shows how much or how many times they've had a chance to sell their property. So Pat, our opportunity to sell percentage inside of our office inside of 28 days is 96%. So we make sure that our sellers have an opportunity to sell their property. Now, some sellers don't accept that opportunity. Some sellers say, look, that's not enough for us to do what we want to do at this present point in time, and that's quite okay. We want to make sure that you've got an opportunity to move on. That's my fundamental role. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Excellent. So pulling that back, so we want to really, I guess, talk about the fact that we can only talk about what we do. This is what I do. This is how I encourage inspections. This is how the marketing that I do encourages inspections. This is my dialogue for dealing with buyers and getting to generate offers, because I stick through people like this, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. Number one is we get an inquiry. My dialogue to translate an inquiry to an inspection. My dialogue post-inspection then tries to create a second inspection or an offer. The dialogue I have from an offer, then it creates them into a bidder. And then on the day, we have dialogues and a good auctioneer to translate bidders into competitive entry on the day. Step your sellers through that, because they don't understand that if we don't tell them. The old, you don't know what you don't know. So a couple to go. We've got another 5 minutes or so, 8 minutes or so to go. So Pat, what have we got?
Auctions make it hard for buyers to buy. Adam Wishart. Look, again, Justin, my only concern is the buyers for my property coming through and talking to you and walking through my front door open for inspections are going to be telling you that they need a finance clause, or they need a building and pest clause or something. Look, I just want to make it easy for them to buy this. I'm really motivated to sell, but I don't want to rule anyone out. What do we do around that?
Well, the first thing I'll say to Mr. Seller is that I've never heard of a property settling that was still conditional. I'm yet to hear of that happening. So let's be really frank and honest and put all the cards on the table here. Buyers have to go unconditional to buy a property. So it's not that they need clauses, it's that they want clauses. And even if you work in an area that's predominantly first home buyers, let's not kid ourselves and say, well, first home buyers can't buy an auction. Absolutely they can. First home buyers have the access of doing a building and pest inspections. First home buyers have the access of going to a mortgage broker and getting approvals to bid at auction. Absolutely they do. So let's not say, oh, it's just not an area where buyers can buy unconditionally, because they have to go unconditional eventually to buy the properties. All the auction does, it actually brings that date forward and works in your seller's favour rather than your buyers. That's all that does. So let's lose that dialogue for a second and say, well, it's not an area here because the buyers can't go unconditional. Well, they absolutely can, because they're going to have to buy the property anyway. So coming back to it, Pat, is that absolutely buyers would much prefer to have terms and conditions attached to the contract. But as we mentioned earlier, that all the terms and conditions here in this local area are weighted in the favour of the buyer, and they all carry risk. So, you know, a building and pest inspection carries this much risk, a finance clause carries this much risk, subject to sale carries this much risk. You know, they all carry different amounts of risk. Cooling off periods are in there as well. So what we want to do is we want to actually force the buyers to do that while the campaign's running, not stop the campaign to be able to do that. And the private treaty, that's what happens. At a private treaty, we say, you know what, let's just put pause on this campaign. Let's allow you to do your stuff. And then if it proceeds, then we will sell you the property. If it doesn't proceed, we then come back to where we were. An auction just means that to say, here is our line in the sand, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. You do your things, but we're going to keep running with this campaign because, you know, our job is to work for the seller, and then we meet at this eventual point here. So it's not changing what we do. All it's doing is actually bringing the time frame to make sure that the campaign doesn't stop while they do this research. And our job, our fundamental role, and we say this over and over and over again, is to do the best thing by our sellers. And the best thing by our sellers is presenting the most favourable contract that they can get, not what suits the buyers the most. Now, does that mean that buyers are less comfortable buying at auction? Of course it does. But I tell you what, if the market runs, and the guys you know, who are here and are listening in Auckland will be a testament to this, or people in Sydney or people in Melbourne, they don't have this problem with buyers in the inner city of Sydney because they know they're going to have to buy at auction. So they just go down there and get their ducks in a row and buy at auction. Because if they don't want to buy at auction, they won't buy a property. When the market tends to turn, we go, oh, don't want to lose a buyer. You know, oh, I tell you what, I'll make it a bit more friendly for my buyers. But the second you make it more friendly for your buyers, you make it less friendly for the person who's paying you and employing you, who is your seller. And you can't have both. There's not a method of sale that the seller loves and the buyers absolutely love as well. You've got to choose one. And our job is to work for the sellers. So, Pat, absolutely, there's going to be some buyers that will go, you know what, I won't look at it, or I won't do this, or I won't do that. But like we mentioned earlier, is we're going to get them eventually if we need them. But my first charter is to get you the most favourable contract that I can. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thanks for clearing that up. Clearance rates. As I said to you before, though, Justin, do you want us just to wrap this up on clearance, tie it into what we were talking about, past experience?
We covered off on clearance rate, so we'll just go to our last.
Auctions make us look desperate. Look, Justin, with all due respect, I want to sell, but I don't want to give the place away. I've got a feeling that auctions align itself with me looking too desperado, and I don't want the buyers to think that they're going to get a score here, because I won't sell if I don't get my price. So why should I go to auction if that's the case?
I've never heard that the seller say they're not going to sell if they don't get their price. I was expecting you to say that if you don't get your money, you're going to rent it out, or you're not going to give it away. I've said that a couple of times before as well. Look, the first thing here is to say, look, auctions. I love when people say, with all due respect, because they're always going to say something disrespectful after that. It's like saying I'm not racist, but then you say something incredible after that statement. But look, auctions aren't going to make you look desperate, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, but what they're certainly going to do is make you look motivated. Now, here's the reason why you need to appear motivated. Because we know in the marketplace right now, there are people that are getting divorced. We know out there in the market there are people that are passing away. We know out there in the marketplace at the moment there are people with financial stress need to sell property. And you say that you're not one of those people. And that's great that you're not on that street. That's really good. But I tell you what you are. You're in competition with them. Because if I'm a buyer, and this property over here says deceased estate, the deceased estate are statistically the highest percentage of auctions that we do. This one over here says deceased estate. This one over here, saying, well, if we don't have money, we're just going to rent it out. We've got no motivation to sell. If I'm a buyer, I'm going to gravitate towards the one with motivation every single day of the week. So our job is this, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. It's not to make you look desperate, but it certainly make you look motivated, because buyers want to deal with motivated sellers. They don't want to deal with unmotivated sellers. But your motivation matters until they walk in the front door, and then emotional connection on the property takes over. So this is why our marketing needs to reflect urgency, because our way of getting you the best price is ironic. It's actually through competition, and you get competition by people going in there wanting to get a bargain. Every single buyer will walk through your property going, I wonder how cheaply I can buy this. I've never met a buyer, and maybe you have, Pat, but I certainly haven't, that's ever walked into a home going, you know what, I'm going to make this seller so happy today. I'm just going to overpay. I'm just going to pay too much money for this, and they're going to be wrapped. Is that true, Pat?
Yeah, I've never seen that before either.
They always walk in going, how cheaply can I get this property for? That's their number one charter. So let's not kid ourselves here. Our job is to attract those people in. You know, it's to put our fishing lines out, or it's to put our net out, or put the burley in the water to get these people in, because what we do by that is create competition, and competition is one of our two key drivers to get the price up. But that doesn't happen without competition, and if we don't have motivation, we don't have competition, and then the whole thing falls down from there. So our job is to make you look motivated, and make sure we do that. But we're not going to make you look desperate, because desperation will eventually harm us. Do you understand the difference?
Yeah, that's great. Hey, thanks for clearing that up. That's been brilliant.
Terrific, mate. Thank you, and thanks for your role play again, Pat. As good as always. So that's going to put a bow on our session today. So if there's any more that you guys have, I'll stay online after. So feel free to tap them away, and we can through them. But the biggest thing is, I think that when we walk in a listing presentation, I know our fear is that we're not going to win the business. That if we say something that we like, we create a situation where we're going to jeopardize our chances. I totally understand that. But our job is to do the best to provide the best pathway to the sale. And now, whether that's taking it on to the seller's price, like we mentioned right at the start, blowing off that steam and going from there, or whether that is actually being brave and saying, look, I know that you've probably got a preferred method, but here's why this method benefits you the most. And that's part of our role to do that. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in this morning. Our next session is on the 27th of July. We're going to talk about generating offers pre-auction, which is a very important topic for us that want to get there. Guys, thank you again. Thanks for your time this morning. We look forward to seeing you in a few weeks' time. Cheers.
Thanks, Justin. Awesome session, mate. Thanks for your time too.
See you.
See you, bye.